Hey everyone, just getting set up here. Um, I hope you all are doing well today. I have been quite busy in my kitchen so far. I this morning made some like an omelet with mushrooms and onions, and then I made some potatoes. Let me show you my potatoes that I made. I haven't had any of these yet, but this is what I'm going to eat like after the live today. I think they look pretty good. And um, yeah, today I'm going to have a friend of mine, Austin, come up, and we're going to talk a little bit about a book that we both read. And um, in the middle of that, I'm going to be cooking whatever's in my fridge. I think some like kale and quinoa. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy that. And I hope that to like type that in the comments section. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to keep track of all of that, but definitely let us know. So, hey Austin, can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
How's everything going?
Good. It's another hot day in Houston, so can't complain.
Yeah, I would say New York State is it's more leather weather. Let's say that.
Yeah. Last night I went out and it was just too hot to wear leather, and so I actually put on neoprene. So at least I'm in the house today and can put on a vest.
Yeah, I mean sometimes you just have to make a compromise. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
So I was wondering before we go into the book if you wanted to talk a little bit about your own personal like leather journey and yeah, how did you find yourself wanting to wear leather and what attracts you about it and just in general things like that.
Sure. Um, so my entire life I've known I've been kinky, but I just got into leather myself, started coming out into the bars and wearing leather and making my own friend group and becoming part of a family in the past year. So
Yeah.
it's still all I'm learning. And so I've been listening to podcasts and reading books and going to events and meeting people and just trying to pick up different people's perspective because it feels it feels very right. It feels very natural for me. And so I want to take in as much information as I can so that I can form my own opinions that come from a lot of different places.
So tell me a little bit about like the journey that you've been so on so far. Like what is that, has there been something that like you figured out about yourself or like yeah during this process something that you figured out that you're like, oh, I always felt this but now I know this to be true for me or something like that.
Yeah. So, like I said, I've always known that I was kinky in my life, but I never really had the words for it. Um, I just found myself feeling different because I was gay or queer, but then even on the outskirts of that, but I never knew the vocabulary for that. Never knew how to identify it. And so it wasn't until I went to my first real kink event, which was Austin Kink Weekend here in Austin, Texas,
Okay.
that I got there on the very first day, and it was just immediate, like a piece of the puzzle fit for me, because everybody, in the best way possible, everybody was their own natural freak self. Everybody showed exactly who they are and weren't afraid to show what made them unique, what made them them. And there was just so much joy and positivity around with, I haven't seen you in so long. And people would come up to one another and I love this part of your gear, or just coming up to people and saying, I really love your smile and I just wanted to let you know that. And so it was an entire weekend of just pure joy and exploration and
Mm.
um, connecting with other people that I knew existed, but I didn't know what the term for it was.
Yeah.
So that weekend felt very healing for me.
Do you have memories or like a way that you would describe your gay life before going to that event, or like how you thought about the gay world in general before discovering the gay world? Like, were there certain emotions or things like that that you had?
Yeah. So I grew up in the suburbs of Houston, and then I moved into Houston to go to college. And so I moved into my dorm and I'm 18 and I'm going out to my very first gay bar. And it just felt, okay, these are my people, but I'm trying to find, I feel safe in this space, but I feel like I need something more. So I got a little bit of the itch that I needed, but there was something still missing. So it wasn't until I was actually 21 that I could go to some of the 21 and up bars. And so there's our fetish bar in here in Houston, the Ripcord, that I went for the very first time. I saw some very eye-opening things. And so it felt, I got the good tingles. I felt this is very exciting. This is a place that I want to be. I don't know what's happening here, but I want to be a part of it. And so I guess throughout my journey, it's been a little piece here, a little piece here. And so it's been very healing and cathartic to like find a community that I know that I fit in, and it feels very wholesome and natural. And I'm just thankful.
Yeah, I would say most of my 20s and, before that, I found that I was always searching for something, and I felt like when I would go to gay events, I often felt like really overwhelmed. It would be a lot of loud music and a lot of just like, I just felt overstimulated, but I didn't feel stimulated in a way that made me feel fulfilled. It was just like too much cotton candy, right? Like, I want a little cotton candy. I don't want a whole bag of cotton candy. And I always found myself with a lot of mixed emotions of thinking like there must be more. There must be more out there, and I'm not finding it. But also being like, well, these people are gay. These must be your people. And it just took me a while to realize my own like inner workings and to find people that had similar inner workings.
Right. So like when I turned 21, 2 months later, I started being a bartender at the gay bars.
Yeah.
And so I did that for 5 years. So I knew people that worked at the different bars between our drag bars and our karaoke bars and our JRs and everything like that. And so I discovered what Houston had to offer, but I never really had, I knew that what the leather scene was, but I felt like I wasn't ready for it. I didn't have the confidence.
Yeah.
I knew it was exciting and I knew it was something that I wanted to do. It was something that I wanted to become a part of, but it didn't feel right at the time. So I observed from afar.
Were you raised in Texas your whole life? Have you been there your whole life?
I've lived in Houston or the suburbs of Houston my entire life.
Okay. And how do you think that has shaped your journey? Because I view Texas as being sometimes quite religious or quite conservative. And how do you think that has impacted you growing up?
There's two sides of the coin. For one, I'm grateful that I live in the fourth largest city in the US.
Yeah.
And so for that, I feel very thankful that there's at least a nightlife, a scene, a gay scene, a queer community, a safe space that I can go to. But
Mm-hmm.
then on the opposite side of that, I've gone to Austin Kink Weekend or Oklahoma City Kinkwinkian to the New York Eagle to San Francisco. And so just different places. And so I see what their queer spaces have to offer. And I appreciate that some spaces are more condensed, that there's more going on. It's more of, they're always doing a charity event or there's always a gear night or something like that. And so I appreciate going out and visiting other places in the world and observing what they have to offer. And I mean, I appreciate it, but I'm also thankful that there's at least some safe space that I have to come back to. Yeah. Ooh. One of us might have a bad connection.
I don't know if it might be both of us. I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
We keep going in and out. But I think you're good right now.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now.
I mean, it's technology, so we'll do our best.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. So tell me, if you had, you had come to me, I think a few months ago asking for book recommendations, and this Out of the Shadows book was one that I had recommended to you. Tell me, like, what are your first thoughts on it?
Yeah. So you had been posting, or you still do post about different quotes or books that have impacted your life and things that stand out. And so you sent me two different screenshots of like maybe 12 books. And so I put them all in my Amazon list and I'm going to order one at a time.
Yeah.
And actually had somebody else recommend the same book, someone here in Houston. And so I knew that I had to put this one on a priority. And my entire life, I've never found joy in reading a book, but I'm discovering it's because the subject has never impacted me or it's never been special enough to me. I obviously know how to read and comprehend, but it's never just been interesting. But this is one of the first books that I've actually picked up, and I was excited about just finding 15 minutes to read 5 pages or whatever. And so I picked up on that very quickly within probably the first 10 pages that I like the writing style, I like the material, I like the narrative voice and what it has to say. And so very quickly I found out, oh, I have to get a pencil, I have to get a highlighter. There's going to be things that are going to hit me. So it's definitely one that I know I'm going to reread eventually in my life. But when you first told me that you think this is a book that every gay man or queer person in general should read, I was hesitant, but I can exactly see why now.
Yeah, I think of it as almost like a Bible for gay men. I do think that really to get the most out of the book, you do have to struggle a bit. It's not something I would hand to like an 18-year-old and be like, enjoy. I think that you have to go through the process, in your 20s of dealing with the struggle of figuring out your identity and also understanding how growing up in a straight world, we as gay men often suppress our identity and we don't allow ourselves like the full expression, often subconsciously. And I feel like this book really highlights that, but you kind of have to go through that process to really appreciate what the book is saying.
Right. I wouldn't want to give this to somebody at 16 that said, I'm gay. I wouldn't immediately want to give this to them. I feel like you definitely need that life experience of being just a gay adult living in our society with all the stigmatizations and the unconscious bias that surrounds us. And I hate to say it, but I feel like you need to struggle a little bit to give yourself a little bit of perspective so that when you actually read the book and you hear the words, it hits you in a different way that may not, or it will not hit you if you are still discovering who you are at such a young age.
I agree. I'm going to grab the book because I wanted to start off with giving you your thoughts on the first part. Basically, like the way the book opens is that they talk about the differences in the uh, gay world, like how gay people frame what a homosexual is versus a straight person. And I thought that was like really interesting. So I'm gonna see if I can just like quickly read this. Again, this is like literally from the first paragraph of the first chapter, and it says, "What is a homosexual? There are two different perspectives on what makes a man a homosexual. The first, the heterosexual perspective, is that homosexuals are men who have sex with men. The gay man's perspective, briefly, is that he is attracted to other men. The difference between the two descriptions is important. The heterosexual identifies a single objective behavior, the gay man an entire internal life, a feeling." And I thought that was like a really interesting thing because I feel like that kind of rings true. I think that we may have, I don't know, I sometimes wonder, like, do we sell a lie to straight people, in that there's nothing different between us except that we just have sex with men? Because I feel like there's a little bit more, what the author is saying is like, there's a little bit more than just sex. There's a whole cultural underpinning to being gay. Like, what do you think about that?
Right. So that spoke to me definitely in the sense that from a straight perspective, there's so much of a focus on the fact that we are men loving men, but that is just one part of who I am, who you are. There's so much deeper variables that make up who we are, that why is there such this heavy focus on that I'm a man that has sex with another man?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, even if you put every single gay person together in one room together, there's so much variety amongst those gay people themselves. And so being gay is probably one of the least interesting things about me. There's been so many life changes or so many parts of my personality and my characteristics that I think impact me more than just I have sex with men.
Right. And I think one thing I think a lot about is being gay. We often have to negotiate, especially early on, of like, who do we disclose that information to, right? That is not a conversation straight people need to have. And I feel like that really impacts the gay sensibility, right? Like there's this like constant shelling that we have of who can we divulge information to, who can we trust. And I think, at least for me, I recognized that I was gay from a very early age. And so I think that kind of sense of trying to discern who to trust and who not to trust, that's something I had to like develop at an early age, which later on the author talks about like how gay boys versus straight boys are different, and this is like one reason is like having to deal with more like existential questions at an earlier age, essentially.
Right. So, I mean, like from my experience, I have a gay older cousin who's probably 10 years older than me.
Mm.
And so I remember in my life when I started to come around to the idea of I want to have like Nick in my classroom. I want to hang out with Nick, but I don't know why. It feels different than the way that other boys want to hang out with other boys.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was at a very young age figuring that out about myself. And my older cousin came out to the entire family and said that he was gay and he was essentially kicked out of the family.
Mm.
And so at a very early age, I saw what might happen if I confronted those fears or those parts of myself that I'd face early in life trauma, essentially.
Yeah.
And so I saw this happen firsthand in my own family, and I knew those are parts of myself that I had to push down, or to at least be more secretive about. I could explore them, but be more careful about who I told and what I did, and make sure that I wasn't getting caught. So what I watched on TV, the books that I read, or like pictures that I even drew late at night and hid under my bed, I found out very quickly how to come up with with a very believable lie, and how to hide parts of myself. And so in doing that, I put up a shell of myself, and I put on this mask that I wore for such a long time at an early age. Um, and I think that's something that I'm still unlearning right now, that it's okay to be vulnerable, that it's okay to be honest. And the parts of myself that make me who I am, they're the best parts of me. And so I need to share those things, to live authentically, to have an honest life.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I think a lot of gay men would identify with that whole journey. Mine is a little bit different in that I didn't have anyone in my family who was out. You know, there were stories of, you know, great uncles who, you know, had a roommate, you know, and things like that, and it was all hush hush. But I didn't really have any models in my life of how to live like a gay life. And the only way, or the only venue that I saw gay people in, was actually through reality TV. And this is like, you know, the early 90s. I'm talking about like the Real World.
Uh-huh.
And I would watch the Real World with, you know, my parents, my mom in particular, and she would always be quite harsh on the gay characters, like every season, you know, and I would internalize her comments and realize that she was not a safe person for me to talk about those particular issues. And it really, quite early on, I mean, like, I'm talking before I was 10, like, there was a wall that I had constructed, and there was this shell that I put myself in because I did not feel safe at home, and I didn't have a way to communicate with anyone else. You know, again, this is like pre-internet. Um, so yeah, I mean, I would say maybe it started like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that I started even acknowledging or recognizing the mask that I was wearing, and that the mask had become too heavy, and that I was not happy having to wear this mask anymore. And I think that there's a lot of people that live their whole life with a mask on, right? Like they don't even know that they're wearing a mask. But for me, I feel like my journey, especially through my 30s, has been uncovering my many masks and discarding the things that are actually not true to me. And I feel like leather has helped me do that.
Right. I mean, it's I mean, I definitely couldn't agree more. It's been very, I mean, I used the word earlier, but it's been very healing to find the parts of myself that I've hidden for so long and was afraid to show, for how I was going to be judged, or for who that was going to be cut out of my life. But I'm at a point in my life right now. I'm 29. I turned 30 in November.
Hmm.
And so essentially my entire 29 year has been about discovering who Austin is. So I've been taking more active risk in my life to do things that I haven't done, to challenge why I believe certain things in my life, to stand up for my own opinions. And so with that has come leather, and I've found some of the most lovable, close-hearted people ever. I mean, I have a chosen family that I'm thankful for, and that I get to see on a regular basis, and in a text group that I get to talk with, and it just, this level of joy that I'm feeling for, I'm releasing parts of myself that I never even thought I could. It's just, it takes a lot of weight off the shoulders, and I'm not afraid to be in a space and show who I am.
I think that's the most important thing. And it goes back to something that you had said a little bit earlier about vulnerability. And I think that, one of the things that we learn as gay kids is we learn how to hide ourselves because we may not be in environments where we can be truly vulnerable. We may not be in supportive environments, but some men kind of like emotionally disconnect themselves and they don't allow themselves to like feel certain things. And I think that allowing yourself to feel vulnerability now allows you to kind of integrate your emotions. And I feel like it's kind of part of the healing process.
Right. So, I mean, from the book itself, like one of the lines that kind of like stuck out to me the most was honestly probably the last sentence. Um, they were men of integrity and courage, and in their struggle to be themselves, they took no prisoners.
Mm.
And so I found myself a lot of times reading this book, and I would read a paragraph or a sentence and just stop, like let it sit with me for a second, and then I'd have to read it again to make sure that I understood it in the way that I thought that I did. And so I read a couple of paragraphs, like once through, paused, second through, paused, and just they're such simple words, but the idea of dropping of the mask, showing your vulnerability, living as an authentic self to the best of your ability is going to serve you the best in the long run. We've only got one chance on this earth, and so I I don't want to have any regrets. I want to take the risk in my life that I feel that are worth it, and I want to be loved for who I am, and not for the mask that I show others.
I think that's great. One place I always go back to in this book is the section on what is shame.
Oh yeah.
And that's one thing that I always just find myself probably like not once a month, but like maybe every other month, like I'll go back to that section. And I'm gonna just read what I have highlighted because I think that this is something that I often have to remind myself, and I think that it's important for other gay men to just be aware of how like shame impacts them because I think it's like really rampant in our community. So I'm going to read. Shame underlies most of the mental health issues: depression, anxiety, suicide, and substance use, previously identified as more prevalent in gay men. Shame is expressed in not wanting to be seen by others because we feel we are someone we do not want to be with others. Shame breeds self-doubt and fosters an impaired sense of self-worth and competence that encourages unnecessarily limited lives. Self-doubt sometimes leads to perfectionism, or more problematically, to an effort to regain a feeling of competence and control through compulsive and sometimes self-destructive behavior. Shame creates rage at the stigmatizing society, but the rage is easily turned on the self as self-neglect or self-abuse. Shame leads to secrecy, which further heightens shame and leads still to more secrecy. Shame produces reactive, compensatory defense that is sometimes self-injurious. Shame suppresses self-expression because one is hiding the self in shame. So I always go back to that because I just think like all the things that we we're talking about of like having to wear a mask. Well, why are you wearing a mask? You know, and it's because of feeling ashamed, at least for me. You know, it was like an ingrained feeling of shame. And I think that's even a step to just recognize that you feel shameful for who you are because society tells you that you should be shameful for being gay.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of times where people, I see a lot of people, especially on Instagram, asking me like how to get involved in the leather community and so forth. And I have to say, I think that like one of the most liberating things is creating a separate Instagram account in which, or like any other like Twitter or whatever account in which you can show yourself without the mask. Like when you can be yourself like authentically, I think that's kind of like that starts opening up that door.
So, on that note, I mean, do you find it's easier to like dip your toe in the water and create that separate account? So you essentially got two. You've got your one that you've got with your family, and then the one that you do your exploration with.
I think so. That's an interesting question because I think that it's better than not doing anything, right? If the comparisons do nothing, I would say create the two accounts. What happened for me, my Instagram story is that, you know, so I have like a private account that I've had since like 2013, which, you know, like I very rarely post on that. And then before the pandemic is when I created this separate account. And when I created this account, there were like zero images of me. It was like solely about food because that was what I wanted the focus to be, and I wanted it to be a way for me to organize like recipes and kind of just to use it as a motivating tool for me to recreate recipes that I had like written down essentially. And along the way, like probably within a few months, friends of mine would say, it would be great if we could see you sometimes, you know, it would be great if you showed up in some of these images. And I was a little bit hesitant, to be quite honest. I didn't know if I wanted to do that. And again, I think that was linked to like shame and not necessarily knowing how I wanted to present myself. But when I did show myself initially, it was more of like my non-leather self, let's say. And what happened, especially that first like 6 months, is it felt like I showed myself, the self that showed up was more of my work self rather than my like authentic self. And then I started, you know, I feel like the pandemic made us all question our morality and what we're doing here. And I got to the point where I was like, listen, I have this separate account, like, let's have fun with it. And I started bringing in leather, I started bringing in masks, and just doing a little bit more, I don't want to say controversial, but like a little edgier posts. And it was like this kind of trickle process where I started sprinkling in things. And I mean, it was interesting to see at, at that time, I gained a lot of followers that were the leather community, but I lost, I would say, the majority of people that who were initially following me because the aesthetic that I was delivering at that time was not um, something they cared for, right? However, the more I was able to show that side of myself, like my more fun side of, mixing in food and leather, the happier I felt, like the more motivated I felt to keep up the project. Like it was like inspiring for me. But I I got a lot of pushback from my family, who at that time I was still in communication with. I'm no longer, speaking to my family, but at that time I would get weird comments about like, why is there so much leather? Like, why are you wearing so much leather? And then, yeah, there was a lot of gossip about them being embarrassed for me, and that was the word that would often come up when my family talked about my Instagram, was that they were embarrassed for me, instead of realizing the process that I was going through of being able to finally show my like more authentic self to the world. They were embarrassed and really demanding that I put the mask back on. So, um, so I went through that process of basically making this into a leather account. It wasn't initially one, but I think if you have to start out with something you feel comfortable with, whether that means you have a separate account or you slowly start integrating more and more things in to experiment with that.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I only have this account myself. And so, like, I know one of these viewers right now is my mother. And so she texted me and said, "Hey, saw that you're doing this. Can I watch?" And so, I mean, I'm at a point in my life where, for me personally, I would rather be the most authentic, honest version of myself. And if you choose that you don't want that, then you can remove yourself out of my life,
Mm-hmm.
because I value so much right now expressing who I am and letting out the most authentic version of myself. And I'm a big believer in your entire life, you're going to continue to change. When you stop changing, you stop learning,
Yeah.
you stop taking in experiences. And so I know that I've actively changed in the past year, the past 5 years, from a more shy, masked version of myself that was very family friendly, let's say, to I'm doing exactly what I want to do. I'm saying the things that I want. I'm getting a little riskier in my life, and I'm posting kink things and leather things, and um, I'm putting whatever I want out into the world. And so I have certain people in my life that support it, and they're like, "This is the happiest that I've ever seen you. Your natural smile seems natural, versus in the past it looks like a mask that you've been wearing." And I'm happy to see this side of Austin that I've never seen before. But then I've also got certain family members that make jokes and comments about, like, "Oh, you posted another butt picture," or that, "Why do you always have to talk about sex?" Or um, just, "Aren't you ashamed of the things that you put online?" And so I get both sides of it myself. But just at this point in my life, for my own self, I'm valuing putting myself first. And for a long time, I considered that to be selfish.
Yeah.
And that being selfish was something to be ashamed of. But throughout my life, I've taken care of others so many times. I've been a people pleaser of, this person looks upset, let me take care of them. This person looks upset, let me take care of them. I find joy in pleasing others. But a big thing in this past year has been I myself am also a people, and so I need to please my own self. And so I'm being selfish. And I'm fully admitting that by doing the things that bring joy to my life and talking and interacting with and living as authentically as I can.
Yeah, I think that's so important because I think part of the learning process is you get to the point where you ask yourself, with each person who's been in your life, are they supporting me or are they holding me back? And, for me, going forward, it's really important for me to surround myself with people who are supporting me. That doesn't mean that like every crazy idea that I come up with that they're gonna have to support, but it's more about supporting me in my journey and realizing uh, pain and trauma that I've gone through, and whether they want me to uh, not show myself or whether they feel comfortable with me showing myself, you know. Um, and I think that we. I feel like our society kind of primes us to be people pleasing, um, especially in familial situations. I feel like there's not enough nuance that's often discussed about like really bad family dynamics and how certain family dynamics can include people that take advantage of their position, uh, and that is to the detriment of other members of the family, and they kind of uphold those things. So what I'm trying to say is that I recognize like the struggle that you've had to like endure, because it's not simply just like coming out, it's also going against like, for a lack of a better word, like the moral code of America, in which the family comes first and then everything else. And I think that a lot of people um, end up living very sad lives by abiding by those particular rules.
Yeah, I mean that that makes a lot of sense. So on that last note, um, it reminds me of something that happened to me. So I went to Austin Kink Weekend, like I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier, and then everything ends on Sunday, and I get a message on Instagram from a guy, and he says, "I saw that you were going because you had been posting about it a few weeks in advance, and I followed your account privately for a while, and so I bought a ticket just to see you in the space."
Mm.
And so this entire weekend, I did not know it, but this guy was at the event and doing his own thing, but obviously paying attention to me. And so then on Sunday, he says, um, "You're very inspiring in that I can see that you're living your authentic self and that you're not afraid to show off who you are and talk." And that hits close to me because I'm 57 years old and I used to be married to a woman and I have kids, but for so long I hid so many parts of myself. And I'm going through the same experience that you are. But in the past 2 years, he had just started showing sides of himself. And so he was just letting me know how much he appreciates seeing people go through that revelation in their life at an earlier age versus waiting until they feel comfortable at a later stage or before it's too late, for lack of better terms. And so I don't know, just that hit me in a certain way that I realized I'm still young in my life and I'm realizing so many intimate parts of myself at a very important time. And so going through these life experiences, reading these books, talking to people like you, I feel like I'm gaining so much knowledge and perspective that I'm excited to see how that plays out throughout the rest of my life. Um, and so that leads me into a question for you. Do you see yourself as an online mentor for others?
I would. I don't know if I'm an online. How do I want to answer this? I'm hoping to be in the future considered more of a mentor at the moment, so I see myself moving in that direction. Like I'm not listing myself as a mentor, let's say that, but people feel free to DM me if you have certain questions. I get questions every day where people ask me how to do certain things, how to get into the scene, or what books to read. And I have not only do I have not no problem answering those questions, I am so thankful that they are asking those questions. So the reason why I had a hesitation in answering that question is that sometimes I feel weird about the people who officially call themselves mentors, because sometimes there is a little bit of, there can be issues there. Some mentors may be, how do I say this? They may abuse the situation. Um, and so that's why, if people come to me, like I will act as if I'm a mentor, but I still have like an uneasiness of taking on that title because, I've seen some places where it hasn't gone appropriately. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It can be a very slippery slope in the self-proclaimed, where they use that power or that mirage of power to negatively infect others or harm others. And so it is a very slippery slope for anybody that wants to share life experience without harming others. And you kind of want to ride a line of, this has been my life experience and here's my advice that I want to give you, but in no way am I telling you what to do.
Yes, precisely. I think that I certainly don't mind sharing bits about my life and walking through challenges that I've had that may help someone see as their own situation from a different light. But I definitely don't want to tell someone, hey, you should do this or that. Like, I think I'd much rather give someone a book, here's a podcast to listen to. And I really, maybe this is like very American of me, but I really admire independence. And I love when people just come up with their own either interpretations or their own conclusions independently. Like I don't like to be forced into doing something or thinking something, and I'm never going to do that to someone
Right.
else. And whenever someone tries to do that, it's a total turn off. Like I have had instances, even this year, where someone's trying to tell me that something's X when it's really Y. And I'm like, you are ruining the situation at the moment by trying to enforce your perspective, which does not really imbibe my perspective. So, yeah.
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, I myself have gone through similar experiences where so many people said, this is the way that you're supposed to do things, and took it as it's the rule. But the way that you've lived your life is unique to your own self. There's only one version of you, there's only one version of me. What you've gone through, I have not gone through. And so I like the way that you approach, um, here's material or here's something that I want you to experience, and come up with your own guideline. And I want to see how you take it and run with it, or even debate it and say, thank you for sharing that with me, but I don't agree with it. And it's okay to disagree with others, but as long as you have your own educated and informed opinions on that matter.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely think that one of the powers of social media and, how we have, I think, a fairly strong leather community here on Instagram is that there are people who you can reach out to. It's quite easy. Just think about like 20 years ago, that was more of a difficult exercise. So that is something to take advantage of, is basically developing community. It is easier and easier to do that. And you don't need to travel. You can really just call someone up and it's that easy. So I want guys to know to take advantage of the technology, to know that it's there, that, if you feel alone, I'm sure that there's someone else out there that feels alone, and you can just strike up a conversation and do that. Yeah.
That was good. I mean, I of course follow many pages on this account and take inspiration and learn, but then a lot of what I've been doing myself is podcast right now.
Hmm.
Um,
What
like
podcast are you listening to?
So like one of them that I listened to and called in and answered questions on is Leather Talk with Leather Edge.
Okay.
So I listen to those every single time that they come out, and I follow his page, and I've called and left questions on his podcast, and so he's responded back to me. So it feels makes me feel warm inside.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, the use of technology makes it a lot easier to connect with people from across different perspectives. If you don't find what you're looking for in your own personal community, we have this tool at our fingertips to look for like-minded individuals that we want to agree with or that we want to explore. But it can be a slippery slope of, I try to struggle with myself that I am not Abernathy on Instagram. I am Austin in person. And so maintaining my vulnerability as an individual and not who I showcase through the phone.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's important. Yeah. Um, there's a few thoughts I was having, but let's talk about this book. I want to ask you a question of, if you had to, what's the best way of saying this? When would you suggest this book to someone? If you were in like a mentorship like position, when would you suggest this book?
So as a preface, I've already suggested it to two people, and they are currently reading it.
Oh wow!
So two of them actually are my neighbors, and so one of them's in chapter 4 right now, and the other one it just got delivered. So, but these are people that are in their 30s right now,
Yeah.
and so if I had to pick some hypothetical time for some unknown person to do this, I would say sometime around like age 25. And the reason I say that is I think that you need to become 18, live out on your own, and then whether you're a bar goer or not, I think once you turn 21 and the use of you can drink alcohol and go into certain clubs does change your life. Whether you're a person that goes out every weekend or not, I recognized a very important shift in my life once I was able to go into bars and drink alcohol. And so I had to find out I had to just take some time in my life to experience who I am. And
Mm.
so, probably about age 25, 27, somewhere in there, I started um, settling into a version of myself that I felt very comfortable with. That I'm no longer an immature child that's ignoring bills or anything like that. I started to find my own inner voice and get comfortable forming my own opinions that were different from the way that I was
Mm.
raised. From having life experiences, dating certain people, going through early in life trauma, later in life trauma, and letting that affect me, going through therapy. And so I think that this personal book hit me at the best time. Um, and I know I would say somewhere around mid to late 20s, I suggest that anybody, any gay man, any queer person read this. Even though the book itself is narrated to the gay man, I personally would suggest that any queer person that feels ostracized by our American or world society read this. And though it may say gay man, gay men a lot, there are parts and aspects of that life, of that inner voice that you can take in and internalize for yourself.
Mm. Thank you. Yeah, I think that that's a great answer. Do you have any other things that you want to talk about from the book in particular before we wrap up? I
Well,
know that you have your book like all flagged out. Like
do what?
you have your book all. You showed me a
Gosh.
picture where you had your book all like post-its. Yes. So I know
Yeah,
you have a lot of thoughts on it. Is there anything that you really want to like touch on that we haven't covered?
yeah. Just so coming into this, I had wrote out like 10 questions that we might go over.
Yeah.
But just in wrapping up, the title of the book is Out of the Shadows.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
So to me, the way I think about that is, let's think about like what happens in the shadows, right? In the shadows, in the dark rooms, that's where gay men are connecting. There is this exchange. Like I find that the dark spaces that I've been in are crazy intense, not just on a physical level, but like sometimes on a very emotional level. But it's not something that like we often could share with other people, right? Like we have these like really crazy experiences in bathhouses, but it's not something that we can bring out to light, or it's not something that a lot of people feel comfortable talking about. So I think about this title, this Out of the Shadows, um, as basically bringing out the things like that, the things that we either have done in the shadows, but also the things that we keep deep inside of us, and we're bringing out to light. And we are, because going back to that shame passage, shame is something in which it constrains us, and it nullifies our self-expression. And I see this title as basically illuminating ourselves, right? Like coming out of the shadows is coming out of a dark period and making things visible.
Yeah. I
What do
mean, I definitely agree. I mean, that's how I feel about it myself. And I was just curious if that impacted you the same way or that was your own interpretation of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a very apt title because I think that it is something about gay life in general is I feel like it's often hidden. At least it's, it's more visible now than it was certainly like 10 years ago or 20 years ago. But still, like when you walk around, it's a very like heteronormative landscape. And I think one of the tenets of this book is to bring that out forward. It's not to like replace the current, you know, way of life, but it's to basically showcase the multitudes and the variety in which people live and the way that they express their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just agree. It's just very interesting. It's just something that I know at some point in my life I'm going to reread it from cover to cover, and I'm just curious how that's going to impact me after I've had time to read it, and I'm now in the process of enacting things.
Yeah.
And how is it going to hit me a second time through?
So along those lines, I'm going to ask you a little bit about your leather journey. Do you, because this is still something that like I'm in the process of, but I had like last year like this big movement, let's say, inside of me where I would never wear like leather boots out in public. If I was going to like a leather bar, for instance, like of course. But if I'm going shopping or like going to a cafe, like I wouldn't put on gear. And now I find that like I just don't give a shit. Like I'm gonna just wear it because that's like again it's about me just showing up as like this is who I am today. Like this is the person who I feel like being, and I find that wearing leather in non-leather spaces has been one of the most like, liberating things because again I think it's like this ingrained internal homophobia. I always felt like, especially with like boots, like people clearly like I'm gay, right? I mean, like clearly, someone who's wearing, boots like this out and about, like it's gonna draw attention, and I think that a lot of people would conclude that like I would be gay. So, the thing that I was taught as a kid was that I should always like try to blend in, and not be so flamboyant about it. But I have to say, like, anytime I wear my boots, I get compliments from everyone, women, men, kids, whatever. Like, and I realize how much of it's all in my head. Like, how much of the fear is like in my head, which has just helped me be more of myself.
Right. So I mean, that's well, on one part, it's Houston and it's hot, and so
Yeah.
like this summer alone, we've had our air conditioning system at my house fixed twice. And so the
Yeah.
weather is definitely different. But to go to your point, it is very liberating because, I mean, for my own experience, I grew up, there's a certain expectation of what you were supposed to wear out in public. If you're going to church, you were expected to wear a collared shirt and your clean jeans, or if you're going to a gala, you're expected to wear whatever. You're supposed to look and form yourself into a version of yourself that was okay for society.
Yeah.
And so now that I'm out on my own, I live with my husband, obviously, here in Houston, and I'm finding space to go to the grocery store and wearing a shirt that says Houston Eagle, or we've got my kink family. We've got an outstanding dinner every Wednesday. You can make it, then lovely. Happy to see you. And so there's a group of us. Sometimes there's 12 of us. Sometimes there's only 3. But I know that every Wednesday there's an opportunity between um, at least some of us kinksters, of us leather people, to wear our gear out in public.
Mm.
And so there's a little bit of that comfort in knowing that you're not going to be the only one. But I'm finding space to go to house parties, to go to the store, to run to the mall, to wear my vest, to show off who I am in a way that makes me feel proud. Because when I put on a cuff, or when I put on my boots, the vest, anything, whatever, I feel confident. I feel proud of who I am, and I want to showcase myself. I feel like right now in my life, I'm in the best mental health, physical health, emotional health that I've ever been. And I want to bring the best version of myself out into public, because I remember at being such a young age going out with my family or something like that. And I would see people that I now know that were gay, but they registered in my mind because they looked different from everyone else. And so, not that I hold myself that highly, but I want to stand out and I want to showcase myself so that maybe I stand out to a young queer person right now that sees me.
Yeah, I think that last point is something that I think a lot about, is that I really want to help young queer kids feel comfortable about being queer at a much earlier age than what I had myself. And I think being out in public in a very gay way is one way to show them that there are different ways of living, different ways of expressing yourself. And I think that's an important mission or job.
Right. I mean, not to get into everything, but with the current political controversies that are happening across America and the world, and the daily stigmatization and attack on our community, I feel like right now it's a very important time to showcase that we're here in every community, whether it be our populated cities, our rural areas, our campsites, or just, I think it's an important time to find out who you are and do it on purpose.
I agree. So as we close up, I'm wondering, I'm going to ask you, in the next year, what are you planning to do concerning your leather journey? Are you thinking about going to certain events, maybe buying a particular piece of gear? What's like ahead of you, do you see?
I'm keeping myself open to everything, because, I mean, as we talked about earlier, when you stop learning, you stop changing, you become stale. And I want to keep myself open to what impacts me in the moment. But a soft goal for me to do is to continue to travel and to go to, like right now on my agenda is I want to volunteer for IML this year. Um, I was watching live on Facebook this year when Marcus Borello won, and I know people that live in the area, and I told myself, I just wish I could have been there. And so I've got a Southwest credit card that's earning me points, and I'd love to register to volunteer that year and help build up a safe space for our community, not just gay people, but our leather community. And so I want to take a very conscious and actionable role in building up the spaces that build me up.
That's great. I am also considering maybe volunteering for IML. I haven't decided officially, but I've gone to IML now twice.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely do plan on returning next May. And I also like every year to do an event that I haven't done before. So I might also next year go to Claw. So that's been on my list, and I was supposed to go in 2020, and then the pandemic happened. So like I haven't actually like registered for that event since then. So I'm planning to do Claw and IML. I go through like my own like winter hibernation mode, and that's starting now. So like I don't feel like traveling usually that much in the winter, and the weather's changing here. It's like gray, and I just have a desire to stay at home and work on a cookbook. I'm working. I have like 45 pages laid out at the moment. And what I'm doing is I'm basically going through the posts that I've had throughout my whole career here on this account and basically writing down the recipes for um, things that I think people would like to make, and then finding a good photo to go along with it. So it's like this like reorganization process, and just like revisiting all the work that I've done in the past like 3 years.
That's very exciting.
So it's a lot of work
Yeah, to
there.
do amongst all of your other projects and your day job and
Exactly.
everything.
Yes. If only this solely paid my bills, but I also have a day job, and that I would say that's the thing that I've been trying to figure out. Is lately I feel after my day job, it's hard to put the effort in my side projects that I really feel like they deserve, and I'm trying to figure out how I want to like manage my schedule going forward so that I'm able to do the things that I want to do and not feel burdened. Like I feel like at the moment I'm putting so much pressure on myself that I get annoyed at myself. And I'm like, all these extra things are just extra. Like they're not paying the bills, but there are things that I enjoy doing. And trying to figure out how to do all of them is quite difficult. So that's like the work that I'm doing at the moment.
Right. So, I mean, just really quickly, I actually got my degree in theater design.
Okay.
And so, for a long time, that was my career. And so, it was something I was passionate about, but it also paid my bills. And then I
Mm.
made a career change during the pandemic, and I'm no longer doing theater to pay my bills. And so, what I do now is a very boring job. Um, and so, having my day job that actually pays my bills, not being creative, makes me yearn to do these side projects.
Yes.
And so I love Halloween. So like right now, I'm building individual Halloween decorations, or I just started getting into leatherwork
Mm.
myself. And so like the armbands that I have now, I crafted myself from hide. And so it's been very, very cathartic for me to have these side projects that still bring me joy. And so I'm sure that's something that you do as well with your cookbook. But as soon as my projects stop bringing me joy, it's time for me to pause and kind of reevaluate what's going on in my life.
I totally agree. And I have so many side projects that I've done like, let's say 30% or 40% of the work. And I have a hard time just leaving it because I kind of just want the check mark, like, all right, like I did it. I did it. And I keep beating myself up and flagellating, just like hitting myself, being like, I should finish this. I should do this. But I agree with you. Like, you have a better, to me, you have like a better way of like saying like, well, this no longer is bringing me joy. Like, why do I need to do this? Um, so that's healthy. So thank you so much
Absolutely.
for agreeing to do this. I really appreciate this this time that we spent together, and I'm also looking forward to keeping up with you in our messages. And also, if you come across a book that you want me to read, let me know, and maybe we could do this again, and that would be fun.
Absolutely. I'll keep a eye for that. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm glad that I got to do this with someone, and especially with you. So I love seeing all your posts. I love hearing your individual voice about leather and just life. And so thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Enjoy.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Have a good day, everyone.